Hello everyone, it's Dianne at Minerva. I hope you're all having a fabulous week, and today I've got something really exciting to share with you. Now, it's the Victoria Blouse. It's one of our Minerva Exclusive patterns. I'm going to share a sew along for that with you. Now, our team here at Minerva have been hard at work these past few months creating this range of Minerva Exclusive patterns. Now, they all come with a full colour instruction booklet. There is an online sew along for each one, and you'll receive a woven label, and the instruction booklet will tell you how and when to add this in. Now, each of our Minerva Exclusive patterns comes in a size range which covers a bust up to 59 inches. So the Minerva Exclusive patterns are in misses and women's sizes. Now, the misses have a bust drafted up to a B cup, and the women's sizes are drafted to a D cup. Now, this roughly covers a size range from UK 2 up to 36. So we've got a good size range there. Now, if you'd like ideas and inspiration, there's a Minerva video showing you what you can make the Victoria blouse in. It's suitable for any woven fabric. So with a little drape, you could use a chamoose, a georgette, a gauze. So as long as it's got some drape, it will be suitable. Now, we'd love to see your makes if you make the Victoria blouse, so please do share it over at Minerva along with the hashtag Minerva Exclusive Patterns or hashtag Victoria Blouse. Now, today I'm going to be doing a sew along in our Minerva Exclusive Viscose Challis, and this one is Boudoir Bouquet, and I just love this fabric. It is such a gorgeous print, isn't it? It looks really quite rich and luxurious. Now, if you want to sew along with me, I will tag this in. Please do wash and prepare your fabric before we get started. Then when we've done that, check that sizing, and then we're going to go and cut our pattern pieces together. Now, the Victoria blouse does have a dolman sleeve, so it allows for extra bust room. It's got a lovely pleat to the front, and that is also really flattering without being bulky. And it's got a nice cuff detail, so we're going to have fun making this. Let's go and cut our pattern pieces together now. So here we have our pattern pieces for our Victoria blouse. Now, this is the back bodice. Now, you have the option here to cut one piece on the fold. So I've cut one piece on the fold and the fold line is here. Or, depending on your fabric and the way you want to place your cutting layout, you can cut it in two pieces. So I'm just going to show you here. I've just folded it back for now. You have this cutting line option here. Now, if you want to cut it as two pieces, you cut it on this line here and you cut two pieces. Now, I've cut one, so I've just folded that back out of the way. So you might want to do this on another occasion, so you might want to do the same. And I've cut it as one piece, so we can have it with or without a central back seam. So I've cut one piece on the fold. We want to make a note of our markings and these circles here. There is also going to be a vent, so we have a marking here, or a slit, if you want to call it that. So we need to make a note of this marking here also. So here we have our front bodice. Again, you have the same option. You can cut it as one piece on the fold, as I've done, or this option here, you can cut it as two pieces, but you need to leave this piece on for your seam allowance. So I've just folded that out of the way. So two pieces if you're having a central front seam, and one piece on the fold if you're making it as I am today. Make a note of your notches, your circles, and your marking for your slit at the side. Here we have our front neck facing. You're going to cut one in fabric on the fold. The fold is here. Make a note of this marking. This is the straight grain going this way. You're also going to cut one on the fold in interfacing. This is your back neck bias. You're going to cut one on the bias or the cross grain like this. It has a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance included. Here we have the sleeve band. You're going to cut two. The straight grain is this way or this way. Again, 1.5 centimetre seam allowance included. Cut two in fabric and two in interfacing. So now we're ready to begin making our blouse. So first of all, wind half of your thread onto your machine spool and also change your machine needle. So we're using a Sharps 70 today, so I will link this in with the products. Make sure that you have a nice sharp needle in, test it on a piece of scrap fabric before we begin, and then we're ready to get started. Now, our first job, if you have cut two pieces for front and back rather than on the fold, is to join that centre back seam. So it's a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance if you're doing that. If not, and you've cut your pieces on the fold, we can move straight to the next step. So as I said, if you've cut it as two pieces, you will have a seam at this centre point here. So if you have cut two pieces, you need to place both sides, right sides facing, and you need to stitch this seam with a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. As you can see, I've cut mine on the fold, so we don't need to do that in this one. Repeat that step for the back pieces also, if you've cut two pieces for the back. Now you're going to take your back piece and we're going to stay stitch around the back neckline. So we're going to do this 1.5 centimetres away from the raw edge. When you've done that, you're going to trim that seam down to 1 centimetre. Now you're going to take your back neck bias and you're going to stitch this in place with a 1 centimetre seam. So here is your back neck, and also in the back neck you might want to snip into the curves a little bit where the curve is most pronounced. Don't go too close to the stitches. A 1 centimetre seam. Now you can let it just hang over the edge just ever so slightly. And if you do have excess at either edge, just trim it off after. So we'll stitch that in place. Now press your seam towards your facing or your bias strip like this. Turn it over, and now we're going to understitch. So we do this a couple of millimetres onto the facing piece, and that's going to keep that seam towards the facing and stop it from rolling outwards. So 2 millimetres away from the edge along this seam line. Now you're going to trim that strip down to 2 centimetres, so you might want to mark it with chalk as I've done. Now at this point, when you've trimmed it, you're going to press it back once so that it encases the raw edges like this. Then when you've done that, I will press it again so that the seam and the bias strip or facing piece is on the inside, like this. I've also folded it in half and made myself a small choke mark here so I can see exactly where the centre is, because at this point we're going to add in our Minerva Maker label. So with it folded back once like this, I'm going to place my label at that centre point, fold it back, and as you can see it encases the label within the bias strip. Pin that in place. And we're now going to sew along that bias strip on the inside, and it will catch in our label as we go. Now you're going to take your front neck facing piece and fuse your interfacing to the wrong side. Also make sure you have these dot marks in place, ready for applying it to the neckline. Now you're going to pin it to the front of your blouse. So pin your facing in place before we stitch it in position. You do need to be careful at this point if you're using Viscose Challis, because it is quite slippery and it may have moved around a little. So just make sure that you're taking care when you're pinning it that you're not stretching it out of place. We're now going to stitch it in place with a 1.5cm seam allowance. Be sure to pivot at the circle marks here, and we will be snipping into that circle after we've finished stitching. Snip to the circle. Not so close that you catch your stitches though. Now press your seam towards your facing, and now we're going to understitch again 2 to 3 millimeters away from that seam, catching the seam onto the facing. Now turn your facing to the wrong side and press it neatly. Then when you've done this, we're going to fold the whole garment to the wearer's left crease line marking, so that is here. So it's as you would wear it on the left side. So the marking is here. We're going to fold it right sides together and we're going to press it. Now at the right front crease line, you're going to press it, but this time with wrong sides together, so it will lie like this when it's finished. Now when you've ironed that in place, unfold it again, and now we're going to stitch our shoulders. So we want our front piece open like this, and we're going to place our back piece on top. We're going to stitch along the shoulders, but we're going to open up the facing like this, and we're going to stop just before the facing piece here. So we're stitching this in position with a 1.5cm seam allowance. So pin that in place first of all. Now as you sew this seam in place, make sure that you line up your notches also and that it doesn't shift. Now fold the facing back to the wrong side, stitch it into that shoulder seam. Then when we've done this, we can repeat on both sides, and then we're going to overlock that seam off. If you don't wish to do this, you could also use a zigzag stitch to finish it off. Now lap over your front pieces once more where you pleated them before. So you made your left crease line and your right crease line. So this right side laps over the front like this, and we have this V neck now. And here we have our stitching marks that were marked on our pattern. You may want to put your pattern piece back on and remark at this point to make sure it's clear. Now I've just pinned mine in place to hold it nicely. We're going to do a horizontal line of stitching along your stitching line here. Then when you've done that, 6 millimeters below it, you're going to do another one. Now align your front and back sleeves like this and side seam. Pin it all in position, matching your notches. Now do bear in mind that the back hangs down a little lower than the front, so line up your marks here for your notches. We're going to sew the underarm seam with a 1.5cm seam allowance down to the notch marking here. We're going to stop and back tack at this point. Now you can finish overlocking the rest of the way to the end of your sleeve, and then at the bottom what we're going to do is press under the seam allowance of the vent like this, and then you can press it back again so that you've got this tiny enclosed hem like this. Now you can tack this with hand stitches if you wish. Then when we've done that, we're going to top stitch around it, box it off at the top, and then down the other side. So we want both sides turned under like this. We'll have this neat narrow hem on the inside of our slit. Now you're going to fuse the interfacing to one side of your sleeve bands, and when you've done this, with right sides facing, you're going to bring the short edges together like this and stitch in place with a 1.5cm seam allowance. press the seam open. And then when you've done so, turn under one long edge, 1.5 centimetres, and press. Repeat on both sides. Now you're going to align your sleeve band with your sleeve. So you want the seam of your sleeve band going to the underarm. So check you've got it the right way. So this is the top. This is the underarm seam. So we're going to align this with the underarm seam. So what's best to do is, if you have right sides facing, and slip it over like this. And then line up that underarm seam with the seam of your sleeve band. Pin it in place. If you mark the halfway point also for the other side here, pin it in place. Pin it all the way around and stitch in place with a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Now, press back your sleeve in half like this, so that the turned under edge of seam that we pressed a moment ago is covering the seam line where we've just stitched our band to our sleeve, like this. Now you're going to pin that in place. Now I've done so from the right side, like this. And from the right side, we're going to top stitch it neatly on the edge of that band, here. Now to create your hem at the bottom, you're going to press up 1.5 centimetres, then press up the hem again. So you open it up and you press to that crease that you've just created, like this, and then you fold that over again so that all your raw edges are enclosed. And this is your hem. So it's a small hem. Hem both sides of your garment. So here we have the finished blouse. So it's lower at the back and side slits. Well, I hope you've enjoyed sewing along with me today. Remember, if you make this pattern, let us know in the comments along with any photographs. And of course, remember to include the hashtags, hashtag Minerva Exclusive Patterns, hashtag Victoria Blouse, and also hashtag Minerva Maker. I'm sure you're excited to see more of the Minerva Exclusive pattern range. Now, today I'm wearing Retro Rockery, one of our Viscose Challis fabrics. Perhaps you would like to make this blouse in this fabric. I will tag this below also with the product description. Now don't forget to take a look at the Minerva Craft Club to get 10% off all your orders for a whole year. And of course, remember to like and follow Minerva to get more video content like this delivered to you every week. Well, that's all from me for today. I hope to be back soon, and thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.